suggestion is that the motion be agreed to. The Honourable Phil Goff.
Mr Speaker, the Labor Party will vote for the first reading of this bill with some rather strong reservations. We believe it should go to a select committee. It should be subject at the select committee to public submissions and very close analysis of what it involves. You know, when I first picked this bill up, I thought I'd probably be quite supportive of its content, because I thought there are clearly things where police services are required where cost recovery might be justifiable. If Mick Jagger is coming to sing at the Westpac Stadium and they're making millions of dollars out of it and we're providing police services, it's profit making. Yeah, I've got no problem with that. They should meet some of the cost of policing a commercial and profit-making arrangement. And when I read the Police Association submission, they used that same example. Or they could have used a professional sporting event, because that's also about making money. But when I pick up this bill, I find that this bill is not about that at all. This bill sets it out in its explanatory note that at present, the only service being proposed for cost recovery is the police vetting service. Now, as I read that, I looked at Kelvin Davis, because he's a teacher. And you know what the biggest organisation is that uses the services of police vetting? It's the Teachers' Council.
Absolutely right.
And the Teachers' Council, there was that experiment back in the 1990s, Mr Speaker, where the national government decided actually teachers and people who worked at schools didn't need to be vetted. It was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster, and they had to bring it back. But what is really important about this is the Minister is telling us that this is not a core function of the police. You know, I picked up the Police Act, Mr Speaker, 2008, and what were its functions? It included maintaining public safety, crime prevention, community support and reassurance. Now, I would have thought that the police role, and it's mandatory under a 2001 piece of legislation, the police role of vetting people for their suitability of looking after our most vulnerable citizens, our kids, in the classroom, at schools, at preschool, I would have thought that that met the primary functions of the police: maintaining public safety, ensuring crime prevention and community support and reassurance. And you know, another of the organisations that this is going to relate to, Child, Youth and Family. I would have thought that vetting people in child, youth and family, not only children, but particularly vulnerable children, I would have thought that that was a core function. I would have thought that our many charities that take on volunteers to work for the public good, who are not paid, but who are subject to mandatory vetting, I would have thought that those groups, all of those groups, would be excluded. But I find from reading the papers, Mr Sabin, that that is not intended. Maybe some of the volunteer groups, but certainly not the largest groups that might use it, the Teachers' Council and Child, Youth and Family. And who are the beneficiaries of those services? Are the beneficiaries people that make money out of it? No, the beneficiaries are our kids. So who is the government intending to charge for that vetting service? Will it charge the teachers? Will it charge the social workers? Will it charge the schools? Will it come down to the parents of those kids who are being protected having to pay? Doesn't this look simply like another form of hidden taxation? Lower the tax on the very wealthy, cut the top tax rates, and sneak in taxes where they can be hidden away. You know, Mr Speaker, I have great respect for the role of the police, and I want the police to carry out their functions, and I don't want them, as a rule, to be cost recovery organisation, and a cost recovery organisation. The police are there for the public good, and where the goal is the public good, there should be no charging. So what we expected was a bill that said we'll charge the entertainment industry, we'll charge the big professional sporting organisations, and we get a bill that is going to charge our kids, our teachers, our schools, our social workers. And, Mr. Speaker, I am not in favour of that. Keeping our kids safe, preventing crime, assuring the public that those who work with our children are fit and proper people to do so are core functions of the police that should not be about cost recovery. It is not profit making, it is public good, and that's the way that it should be. Now, I've given some more thought to why we've got this bill before us, Mr. Speaker. Yes, that was something that was considered in the review leading up to the Police Act of 2008. It was something that a Labor government decided not to do, and with very good reason. But why are they trying to do it now? Well, the reason is set out actually in the public consultation document, the public consultation document, which was about the cost recovery of policing services. And this is what it says, Mr. Speaker. It says the allocation of resources across competing services is finely balanced. The future sustainability of police services depends on there being room for improvements or investment in new areas requiring additional police resources. Ultimately, cost recovery provides the opportunity to free up some police resources and better ensure funding is focused on other areas. We have this bill before the House because for 6 years this national government has cut the funding for our police force in real terms. In real terms. You know, I went to the library and I said to the library, the parliamentary library, I said, can you give us the real level of funding in 2010 and the real level of funding this year, and tell me how much extra the government has invested in policing? Do you know what the answer was? Wasn't anything extra. They had cut the police budget in real terms by $114 million. $114 million cutting the police budget. So what has that forced the police to do? Well, they've closed community police stations, haven't they? Let's list them around my area. St Luke's, Mount Albert, Blockhouse Bay. They didn't have the courage to say that they were cutting the Mount Roskill police station, but they did. It's had temporarily closed for 2.5 years before they had the courage to admit that it was closed to the public. They've delayed recruiting police officers. So the actual number of serving police officers fell last year. It fell. We had a smaller number of police officers than was the minimum level of police officers that should be out there on the front line. And of course, in this budget, we saw cuts in core operating expenditure. What were those cuts? They were $40 million in the budget this year. $40 million this year alone. What were the areas cut? Crime prevention, $3.5 million out of that. Investigations, $7 million from that. Primary response, you'd think that's really important. How many of us have had constituents complain that when they were burgled, they rang up the police and they said, yeah, we'll get to it eventually. Don't touch anything because we'll eventually fingerprint it. Don't replace the broken sliding door. I know it's the middle of winter, we'll get there eventually. Well, do we blame the police officer? No, we don't blame the police officer, because $7 million was cut out of primary response for the police this year. And road policing, we're meant to really put that on a pedestal. That was cut by $10 million. So, Mr. Speaker, this has had a dramatic impact. The police have been placed in the position now where they're being told by this government, no increase in real terms. Forget the fact that policing is a fundamental responsibility of a New Zealand government. We want you to go out and get money from the people you provide services to. And where will we start? We'll start with the school kids. Yeah, that's the sort of government we really want, isn't it? That's the sort, and the social workers. So, Mr. Speaker, if we are going to have cost recovery, let's put it in the right place. Let's put it on the commercial profit-making organisations. Let's not put it on those core functions that we expect, as of right, the police should be providing the public with.